What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Week 5 edition of the Pro Football Focus Show here on RotoGrinders. I am Britt Devine, here with PFF's Ian Hartitz. You can follow him on Twitter at iHartitz. That's IHARTITZ. Ian, Week 4 is behind us. We've got there's a lot of moving parts in the NFL nowadays. We've got Sunday night football, Monday night football, Tuesday night football. I mean, are we going to have like a Wednesday and a Friday night football by the time it's all said and done? You got to really stay on top of things. But I mean, the show moves on. NFL is going to keep going on. Hopefully these recent COVID things sort of work themselves out. But it just keeps getting more interesting as the season moves on.
Yeah, extremely funky year. We just got to keep rolling with the punches as usual. I mean, unfortunately, we got a few more variables to worry about, but to a different level, like these things happen every year with guys getting suspended, injured out of nowhere. So just got to try to stay ahead of the game. It's an unfortunate problem, but it's impacting all of us equally. So may the best man win.
Yeah, if you are on any of the DFS sites, it does seem, if you're playing like the Sunday main slate, right? And like the Bills games got moved and the Patriots game, and things like that get moved around. They basically just take them off the slate so you don't have to worry about them. And hey, you get more showdowns. You get more like a Monday through Tuesday slate and things like that. So it's just more DFS for us to play. We're going to generally focus on the main slate as we progress through the show here. And as always, we like to start off with the Mismatch Manifesto over at PFF. It is behind the paywall over there, but you do get a free look at it on this pod every week. And if you're watching, you basically get to look at it as Ian reads through here. Ian, maybe we've got some new listeners. Tell them what it is, and let's jump into the Week 5 slate here.
Yeah, you can also find it on my Twitter, as you said before. I tweet out the actual charts every week and then break them down in the article. But yeah, basically the whole idea just came from whenever we talk about matchups in football, it's always, okay, this running back has a good matchup because his offense ranks third in this and he's facing a defense ranked 23rd in this. By combining those stats, I found you can get these nice kind of layouts where it's a little bit easier to pick up on the mismatches around the league. So first one, for example, is looking at explosive pass play rate. How often are teams throwing completions at least 20 gaining at least 20 yards, how often our defense is allowing them. And, looking at this week, you can see that Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, and Josh Allen particularly are standing out. I mean, man, that Vikings Seahawks game, I know both of these are run-first offenses, but this is a situation where we can feel good about still going at a run-first offense because they make big plays, and they're throwing downfield when they do throw, and we actually have condensed target share with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, as well as Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. So I know some people out there are wondering if Jefferson can keep it up. Absolutely love his chances to do so in this spot.
Yeah, it's the Sunday night game. If you're watching Showdown or if you're playing, I do a lot of the Thursday through Monday slates. I think there's a fun, you get to play those games you don't get on the main slate, and you get to include everyone else on those. That game looks prime for fireworks. The explosive pass plays. If you get a lot of those, right, you need those. Your quarterback has to score like 8,000 points, and the wide receivers attached to him also have to score those points if you're going to compete in things like the millionaire makers nowadays. So you got to have those explosive pass plays. What else are we looking at over here on here? Pace is something that's always fun to watch. I know the Cowboys there on this slate, they have led in pace, I think, for a variety of reasons. We're going to hash it out a little bit later when we talk about quarterbacks. But what do you see as far as pace? Do you think the Cowboys can keep it up? If not, where else are we looking?
Yeah, and it is important to know, like, this is, from Football Outsiders, situation neutral pace. So they have tried to, remove the occasions where Cowboys are down 3 scores. Of course, they're going to be running up and down the field as fast as possible. They truly are just moving, though, even in these situations where, they're in the games, they're still moving faster than anyone. I mean, right now, 23.6 seconds per play. The Cardinals are in second place at 26.3. So, I mean, it's really a situation where it's almost 3 seconds faster per play than the next closest team. We've seen that result in many shootouts to start the year. So yeah, Cowboys, Giants, obviously number one, but also we got the Rams versus the Washington football team and Cardinals, Jets, if that game ends up happening. The only thing I would note here with the Washington team, I know it hasn't gone well. I'm not expecting, Kyle Allen to come in and really just ball out or anything, but you have seen these types of things like pace, play action, things that smart teams are doing. We have seen from Washington so far. Hasn't worked out, but, maybe, just maybe, Kyle Allen, the guy that knows the system, can continue to get the most out of McLaurin and Gibson at a minimum.
The objectively one of the worst quarterbacks in the league last year, knows the system, Kyle Allen. We'll talk about him maybe a little bit. He's 4,100 on DraftKings. And I told you pre-show, normally we would be just drooling at a $4,100 quarterback if this was 2019 DFS. I don't really think a lot of people are going to be using Kyle Allen this week because you have to have those monster scores at the position now. And
Yeah.
I just don't know if he has the upside. So we'll see what happens with him. Pressure is something that's always good. What do you got here? Offensive, defensive line, this type of stuff, really works well for defenses. And then if you can try to pick that out on the offensive side, allowing pressure, maybe you want to stay away from those quarterbacks.
Yeah, 3 quarterbacks we're seeing pop out that could be in particular trouble. Carson Wentz against the Steelers defense. They're pressuring opposing QBs on 50% of their dropbacks. No one else is even at 40. We know that Eagles offensive line is looking like Swiss cheese at the moment. Man, I hope Wentz can stay healthy because right now he is just playing so recklessly, not looking great for him. But Broncos, if Drew Lock's under center, he's going to be under a lot of pressure. I know the Patriots, don't have Gilmore, but still not a matchup I think we should be looking to target. And then Justin Herbert going to the Saints. Guys balling out. At some point, we're going to see a rookie floor. If the Saints starting corners remain out, might not be this week, but just something to keep an eye on. And then on the other side, though, the quarterbacks that should have all day to throw, the 4 guys we're really seeing stick out, Teddy Bridgewater and Matt Ryan. I think this is a game we might be targeting the over. Exactly. Shootout, man. And then Phillip Rivers against the Browns. Probably won't have enough pass game volume to make the most out of it, but definitely a situation to monitor, particularly that Carolina Panthers offense that I think all things considered, with all the continuity they just didn't have going this year really across the entire offense. They've really, I think, outperformed September expectations.
Yeah, and you've seen, hey, taking CMC and a bunch of 3-yard dump offs make them a better team when they're throwing the ball downfield to DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson? Maybe it does. Maybe I mean, CMC is objectively a really good football player, but by removing him and passing the ball downfield a little bit more, I don't know if there's anything to it, but I don't know. Maybe there is out there. Some interesting stuff going out there on Twitter. Running backs, offensive lines, defensive lines in the trenches there, yards before contact. What do we see there this week? Any big edges we can gain?
Yeah, I like to look at yards before contact just because, as we like to say, running backs don't matter. So let's try to find the situations where, the offensive line should be enabling, hopefully, any running back to success. And we will need that this week in the top run game mismatch. That's the Cardinals against the Jets. Cardinals are continuing to be great in yards before contact. And we see this year after year where the top teams are these squads that have a dual threat quarterback, just forcing the defensive ends to hesitate that much longer, can really provide some bigger rushing lanes. So going back to Kenyon Drake for another week. I mean, okay, not a top 12 player these days, but still think he should be in lineups. And after getting toasted, in that smash spot last week against the Panthers, interesting post-hype spot for Drake here. I would also note the 49ers backfield. We'll see how Raheem Mostert, but if Mostert's out, man, Jerick McKinnon, every down running back right now in a great matchup against the Dolphins. I think he is cash game viable if we do see Mostert remain out. And then also Josh Jacobs against the Chiefs. Chiefs have allowed a league high 2.6 yards before contact per rush. I don't like calling, run defenses particularly bad because we have these teams like the Chiefs that they almost just invite you to run the ball because they know that that's in their best interest.
Damian Harris is busting off big runs. You know they're doing it on purpose.
Exactly, man. But in this case, kind of like Damian, like Josh Jacobs, he's game script dependent to an extent, but he's going to get his 15 plus carries regardless of what happens. And in this matchup, I think he could really make the most of them.
I do want to know, you mentioned Kenyon Drake. If you guys are living under a rock, the Jets this morning have a player. They received a positive test. They're confirming that. All right. It's like Friday afternoon when we're recording this. They're trying to decide, hey, was that a real positive? Was it a false positive? That game could be moved off the slate. So just know, don't just go locking in Kyler Murray, Kenyon Drake, and those guys into your lineups right now. It's still in flux. That could be another Tuesday night. It could be a Wednesday night game. So just understand that that's a fluid situation. Anything else in Mismatch Manifesto that really stands out to you this week?
Yeah, we've been having a lot of success with the EPA portion. I take the EPA per play of the offense, add it to the defense, and when we've gotten 2 matchups where each offense has a positive number, meaning they're in a good position, the overs have gone 16, 5, and 1 through these weeks. Now we've seen the overs, take a step up, and I think the opening totals, make sure the line you're looking at now isn't too far removed from the opening line and everything. But it does make sense that we want to target these games where we have offenses set up well on both sidelines. And this week, the qualifiers are Bills Titans, Raiders Chiefs, Jaguars Texans, Panthers Falcons, Vikings Seahawks, and Chargers Saints. It's if you just blindly betting these overs based on this trend, you've been doing pretty good so far. That has been my strategy to this point. I'd look a little closer at some of the injuries here, and Jaguars Texans really does have a slow pace, so a little bit concerning. But honestly, with all these matchups this week, I do feel pretty good about it because we have at a minimum above average offenses on both sidelines.
All right, hey. when we get to the betting section. Why don't we just switch to all these overs? I think maybe that
Pretty
might, I mean, we're doing good over there. The Cowboys killed you a little bit last week, but I mean, if it's hitting this well, maybe we should really start looking at this sort of thing. So that does it for the Mismatch Manifesto. Again, if you have the PFF subscription over there, you will be able to read that. Later in the show, we will go over the helicopter targets article that is free for all over on PFF. You can go peep it out now. We're going to talk about it later and get some reasoning behind those now. And real quick, we're over at RotoGrinders. We have RotoGrinders Premium. It's great. You get Lineup HQ, you get Gridiron IQ, you get access to all the articles for all the sports. If you watch this show and you want access to it, later we'll talk about ownership and things like that, and I'll show you some Gridiron IQ. If you want access to all that stuff, you can get a $5 discount on your first month subscription if you are a new subscriber to RotoGrinders Premium. It is rotogrinders.com/media/PFF. And you will get $5 off your first month over here at RotoGrinders. All right, let's jump into bets. My record this year, I'm 6-3, right? So I'm doing all right, staying above the trend line there to break even. One I got this week, I got this at +2.5. It's now +1. So what do they call that? Closing line value? I don't know, CLV, whatever the cool kids call it out there. And this is the Browns because Ian, I don't think the Colts are good. I think they're sort of like the Bears. They're a little fraudulent. You look at who they played. They lost to the Jaguars. They beat the Jets, the Vikings, and the Bears are very fraudulent as well. They won because Tampa Bay is just decimated by injuries, and BDN, he came out and had some late game heroics. Basically, that's what happened there. But I don't think the Colts are very good. I think the Browns are basically better across the board at every skill position on offense, maybe even the offensive line. The Browns offensive line isn't any joke. I think their defense is pretty good. I think they're basically, even if not the Browns being a little bit better. So I got this Monday. I saw it. I drove the 10 minutes to the sports book, but I think it's still bettable at +1. I got the Browns as my one bet. My main one, I'm going to talk a couple of parlays you can go on here. What are you looking at this week?
Yeah, I got a couple underdogs I like, in addition to those overs we mentioned before, but Panthers at +1.5. We've seen these games over the past 2 weeks where I think if we look a little closer than maybe we did, we could, ask just why exactly is this other team favored? And to me, that was Browns Cowboys last week, which again, unfortunately blew up my own money line parlay back in the Cowboys. So that's on me, everyone. But then before that, Lions Cardinals, where, you have a team in the Panthers that, okay, they haven't blown the door off from anyone, but the Falcons have looked legitimately bad for stretches. The Panthers seem to be ascending, which we mentioned before. But Teddy, this makes sense. We would expect them to get more comfortable in this offense moving forward. The defense hasn't looked all that bad, and honestly, in this matchup, they might very well be the better defense considering all the injuries that the Falcons have going on in the secondary. So I just think the Panthers are better, and the fact we're getting 1.5 give me that all day. And this is my second bet. I like the Jaguars at +5.5. We're giving the Texans right now like almost a touchdown favorites. Like, why? Same thing with the Falcons. So I do think they'll bounce back to some extent. I'm not, taking the Jaguars money line. If I, had a gun to my head, I would say the Texans are going to win this. But, looking at some of these metrics in my Mismatch Manifesto, like Jaguars have twice the projected offensive, EPA efficiency as the Texans. They've been good this year on offense. James Robinson and Gardner Minshew. Minshew had the one dud on Thursday Night Football that people remember, but I really think Chark being out affected that. I mean, when you have a team that's, not super high on overall talent, losing an alpha number one like Chark could, seemingly make that become a disastrous situation. So again, I think it's two teams that the Jaguars have probably been better this year, and I think 6 points is just far too high.
All right, a couple others. Arizona -7 if it goes. I think the Jets are literally the stone worst team. The only way they have any offense is Sam Darnold. He's been slinging it around a little bit. He's out for Joe Flacco. So if that game goes, I think I got that at 6.5 earlier on Monday. I still like it at 7. I got the Chiefs. I normally don't take these giant favorites, but 11.5 against the Raiders. That seems, I don't know. I think the Chiefs probably just absolutely blow them out. And the Chiefs defense is they're so good against the pass that once they get up a touchdown or two, it's lights out for anybody going up against them. And then I think you could do the big favorites. You just missed out on. It was like a plus almost a 500 parlay taking all the favorites. Dallas just clipped you last week. I think you can add the Chiefs, Ravens, Seattle, basically to almost any bet you make. It adds if you just do that on its own. I just looked it up in the DK Sportsbook. It was a -130 for those. That's just like free money. I don't see how the Chiefs lose. I don't see how the Ravens lose, although I do like the Bengals. I think they're at like plus 12.5 or something like that. I just don't see how the Ravens lose that game. Seattle's just too good at home against Minnesota, and I think Minnesota's pretty horrible. That's just a very easy W for Seattle, in my opinion. So if you're playing a money line parlay, I like that one. It's minus 130. Anything else for the bets, or you want to jump into the week 5
Yeah, I
slate?
think we're good. I'm with you. The Vikings concern me a little bit, but I think I'm still, thinking about them as having a good defense.
They
And that
don't
is just not the case in 2020.
they don't pass enough. They pass deep
Yeah.
when they do, which that can get there, but I think that's a little unsustainable coming from Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
Give me Russell Wilson throwing deep at home. Give me that. That just sounds like a very easy victory.
No, I'm with you. And again, if the Vikings defense was getting healthier, I'd feel better about it. But no, yeah, I think at a minimum with the money line, yes, definitely the Seahawks.
All right, let's jump into the week 5 slate, and it's getting a little interesting. We'll start at quarterback. And currently on our RotoGrinders projected ownership, we have Dak Prescott basically leading the way by almost double over the next quarterback at projected ownership. And I don't know. I think the weeks to really use Dak, looking in hindsight, were probably the last 2 or 3, right? So let's go over what's happened with Dak Prescott over the past, let's say, 3 weeks and see why he's had these absolutely, great performances. So week 2, 3 rushing touchdowns from a quarterback. Call me crazy, Ian. Don't see that happening for any quarterback the rest of the year. I think that one is a little unsustainable. I look back at the last 2 weeks, right? And Dak's throwing all over the field. Why is that happening? Well, Dallas, they're leading the league in turnovers per game. Is that going to continue? All the fumbles that they're having? Probably not. Dak has 57 and 58 pass attempts over the past 2 weeks because they fumble, they get behind, they play fast, and then they have to just throw the rest of the entire game. I think that's, I know they're playing fast, right? We talk about that, but I think what's leading to all of that in general is slightly unsustainable as well, right? Them turning the ball over and these 58, 57 pass attempts that Dak has had. I see this as an easy W for Dallas, barring those fumbles and things like that this week. So I'm moving off Dak a little bit. I think the weeks to use Dak are behind. If people are going to chase it, I think I'm personally going to move off it a little bit this week. I'm looking to pay a little bit for Lamar Jackson. We saw Wednesday, Thursday, oh, my knee, we're being cautious with him. It's all a lie. He's out there today. He's like, I'm good. He's going to run all over the Bengals. The Bengals are allowing the 4th most rushing yards in the league. Bengals pass defense isn't horrible. They've got some actual reasonable grades on PFF and the team thing, but I just think he's so good. Eventually he's going to connect. He's missing Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews all over the place for big plays week after week. He's still getting a couple of them, but like these big games are just going to be like, if you don't have Lamar, you're not going to win that week. I think this week could be one of them. I'm paying a little bit more for Lamar. I think his production is much more sustainable than what we're seeing from Dak right now. I like Dak. I think he's going to have a great year. I think he's had a great couple of games. I'm paying more for Lamar this week. So he's someone I like in cash. You've got someone, if you need to save a couple of bucks, it's just really hard. I mean, we did see Teddy. He broke out the legs a little bit last week. So you got to have this rushing aspect with your quarterback now.
Yeah, I'm down to pay up for Lamar, as you're saying. And also, even though you are paying up for Lamar, because Hollywood and, Mark Andrews, if you just lump them in as like wide receivers compared to everyone else, you don't have to pay as much there. So, actually the Lamar, Andrews, Hollywood stack ends up being similarly priced, if you tried to go down to Dak, Cooper, Gallup, wherever.
Dallas, you got to waste a lot of stacks too, playing Gallup and Schultz and Lamb.
It's at least condensed. Yeah, it's condensed with the Ravens. So no, I'm with you there. But yeah, if you want to go down to the Panthers, I think it's a situation where you can go Teddy, Mike Davis, and then one of Robbie or DJ and be feeling pretty good about yourself. I mean, look, this Falcons defense, again, already not a situation to worry about, but you look at just the amount of safeties they have on IR now, and it's just getting out of control. Cornerback room isn't very healthy either. And again, even when they're healthy, not a situation we've been concerning with. And you said it about that Teddy mobility, man. He has never, before the knee injury, he can move around a little bit, but that touchdown run was not just, some no one even around there. He made a good 2 or 3 guys miss on his way to the end zone. So he's looking healthy as ever. He's averaging career high marks in most passing efficiency metrics, despite, being only 4 weeks into this year. And kind of lost in the whole DJ Moore versus Robbie Anderson thing is the reality that it's just those two guys at the top of the offense. I mean, the problem was McCaffrey or their running back just, superseding both of the guys and being the overall number one. I mentioned before those kind of condensed target shares with the Vikings. It's the Chargers, the Vikings, and the Panthers in terms of having the most condensed top two guys at the top of the target share. So I'm fine going with Teddy and this pristine matchup. And then for GPP, hurts me to say this, not my favorite guy out there in the world, but Derek Carr, someone I've, mocked a lot in the old Twitter sphere over the years, but he's playing some good ball so far, man. Don't look now, but I understand like he's not throwing downfield still, but he's throwing for 250 plus yards and multiple scores in 3 consecutive weeks. We've seen him pop off against the Chiefs in the past. I know that this is an improving pass defense, as you said, but they're getting Henry Ruggs back seemingly. I know Carr probably isn't going to be stretching the field with him, but just having that speed guy out there forces the defense to respect it. The fact that he is cheaper than Sam Darnold and being priced where he is right now is just too much. I'm not going to be loading up on Carr and GPPs. I do question kind of the overall ceiling, but I just think his price point's a good $500 too cheap.
Yeah, just ultra efficient, right? 72.7 is his lowest completion percentage on the season, right? So all the little dink and dunks to Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow, you get Ruggs coming back, it might open up those underneath passes to Waller a little bit more, or God forbid if they used Ruggs on a couple of those crossing routes, he can take him to the house here too. So I like that. And you can pair him with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, right? You can use them with Hill or Kelsey if the game gets into a shootout on a run back. I don't hate that. The one thing I want to talk about though, the only thing going against you, Ian, is you have no shot with your Derek Carr because he's not running for like 40 yards or, he doesn't have that rushing touchdown ability. Maybe he does, but I guess I just want to spend a couple minutes on what's going on in the DFS landscape. And I talked about it in my week 3 Millionaire Maker article. It's staying prevalent. I expect it to probably continue. I'll have another article out on Monday or Tuesday recapping the first 5 weeks of RotoGrinders. But you have to have the quarterback with the quarterbacks before you could get by with 22 or 24 fantasy points, and he targeted one guy 10 times and that guy caught a touchdown and he had 100 yards. And that was a good way to start a stack. It's not cutting it in 2020. The penalties are lower. There's more points being scored. The good quarterbacks are getting the big scores that are high owned. And if you don't have those guys that have the access to the 40 plus fantasy points, Dak and Lamar and Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, if you don't have that type of elite quarterback, right? Like Ryan Fitzpatrick, he had 24 fantasy points. Devontae Parker got there last week and it did nothing for you because Dak Prescott's out there with 45 fantasy points and all those other, and Odell has like 40 and Joe Mixon has 40. If you don't have that at basically every position, and that's moved to quarterback, you're dead in the water. So it's really hard for me to find these low-owned GPP quarterbacks anymore because they just suck. They're not going to get there, and they're not going to win you these big tournaments. I think Carr is probably one that might, right? I think you could see the game script for it. So I like that call. I'm looking at Minshew this week. You had the Jags at plus 5.5. I don't think the Texans are any good. I don't think Bill O'Brien, what has Romeo Crennel ever done, right? I don't think the Texans, are they going to rise up and play for him or anything like that? Maybe. But the grades on PFF just look really bad. 28th in pass rush as a team, 27th in coverage. Minshew, he hasn't really shown it this year, but last year, right, he showed the rushing upside that he has. It's one of the reasons he was really good in fantasy. He was able to get 30 or 40 yards pretty consistently. If he gets the rushing touchdown, he's got his alpha receiver, DJ Shark. He reemerged last week as the true number one target there. And if you like a Will Fuller or you play Deshaun Watson or maybe David Johnson, Brandon Cooks, I don't know what people were doing last week over there. That was a pass for me. I liked Renfrow instead. But there's ways if that game shoots out, I think Minshew has the ability as a lower owned quarterback. The problem is he's 6,200 on DraftKings and your car is 5,300. I wish Minshew was a little cheaper, but that's where I'm looking at in tournaments. It's just really hard in the current state of the NFL to try to find, like Phillip Rivers is not going to win a tournament this year, right?
Never.
As good as Ben Roethlisberger is, the statue quarterbacks that just don't run, I think you're just dead in most weeks if you try to use them in tournaments.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And then especially when you consider that, ownership at the QB position is always flatter than we see, elsewhere. So paying up for these guys like Dak and Russ and whoever it might be on a per week basis, it has been making sense so far.
All right, let's move to running back. And one of the interesting things is running backs, the high on running backs, you're basically missing on them every single week. They're not really coming through like they used to. Surprise when you had Christian McCaffrey, even though he was 10,000, he was getting 35 every week and everyone was playing him, right? It worked out great. It's not really working out this year. I do like going back to Zeke this week. Again, I'm off Dak because I think this is the Zeke game for your cash teams. The O-line's hurting, but it's hard to argue against his workload. He's got at least 20 opportunities in each game, 25 plus opportunities. That's rushes plus targets is what I consider an opportunity in 3 of his 4 games. Dallas, there's still 6th in the NFL in success rushing rate per gridiron IQ. I don't know. I don't think Dallas fumbles like 40 times again in this game or anything like that. I don't think the Giants offense gets out to a 21-0 lead or anything like that. I think this is Zeke. I think it's like 25 carries. I think it's 5 or 6 targets. I think it's 2 touchdowns. This is Zeke, and he's 7,800 on DraftKings. He should be like 9,200 in my opinion. I'm playing Zeke in cash.
Yeah, he definitely seems like he's still priced a little bit too low. I'm going to go down a little bit to Mike Davis. If Raheem Mostert is out, I would be fine going with McKinnon over Mike Davis here.
Hey, I like Davis. You can play all 3 in my opinion.
There we go, man. Like, why not? Let's get them all in there. But yeah, I mean, just looking at what Davis has done last 2 weeks, he truly is pretty much playing the Christian McCaffrey role. Right now, only Kamara and who you just mentioned, Ezekiel Elliott, have more targets on the entire season. That's even with Davis doing nothing in week 1. So last week, we saw Reggie Bonifant come in and take a quarter of the snaps in a game that the Panthers were surprisingly blown out. Well, that's really wasn't an issue to begin with. Now Bonifant's on IR as it is. Like, they've already pretty much given up on the Curtis Samuel, getting some actual backfield snaps.
Trenton Cannon is the number 2 running back this week.
We are seriously looking at like 98, 99% snaps from Mike Davis. Already talked about this Falcons matchup. The Falcons year after year after year give up the most receptions in the league to running backs. It's part of their defense. And I mean, who can blame them? They want to allow short completions in front of them, not, deep balls over their head, regardless of the schematic, principles involved. I mean, this is a defense that just, again, is continuously killed by these sort of receiving running backs. And shout out to Davis for looking pretty good. I mean, he's racked up 18 forced missed tackles. That's tied for the 5th highest mark in the league. So I think the guy is not just some, mediocre journeyman back. He's actually solid, and he's getting all the workload we could ask for in a prime matchup. I'm finding it in the chalk with Mike Davis. And GPPs, I wouldn't put this with the Derek Carr lineups necessarily, but I just like this matchup with the Chiefs and Raiders because I think there's just going to be points flying all over the place. Just we need to figure out where it's going to be, but don't be afraid to go with Josh Jacobs. I mentioned this before in the Mismatch Manifesto section, but Chiefs league high 2.6 yards before contact allowed. And Josh Jacobs' usage so far has actually been pretty good this year. He only played over 60% of the offensive snaps in 4 of 13 games last year. He's managed to clear that in all 4 weeks to start this year. Jalen Richard's a little bit banged up. He's not getting, 6-8 targets per game, and it's annoying because we see him out there make good use of the targets he does get. But even the fact that we are getting 3-4 targets per game, that's much better than we saw last season. Jacobs is going to get his 15 carries. So we're looking at one of the league's more talented backs at just 6,300 with pretty low ownership. So, wouldn't be surprised at all if he can turn these 20 opportunities into 100 plus yards and a touchdown.
Yeah, last week you needed Joe. If you didn't have Joe Mixon, no cash in tournaments for you. I mean, there were ways to get there, but you weren't sniffing anywhere near the top. So like running, but it's really different this year. The high owned wide receivers are performing really well because the high owned quarterbacks are performing really well. And now the high owned running backs are basically letting us down every week. So I like the Josh Jacobs call. I'm going to take a little wind out of your sails for a little later segment for my tournament play, but I'm looking at Antonio Gibson. He is turning into, I wish they would just give him a little more leash. I think as the season progresses, you'll get it. I don't know if it's this week with the new quarterback change, but he saw 18 opportunities last week. He's got Kyle Allen, who loved to check down last year, right? Well, it was DJ Moore. It was CMC last year, just getting all these targets. Antonio Gibson has the possibility to replicate that. And if you look at it, they're facing the Rams, right? The Rams, they got Jalen Ramsey on the outside. Their pass defense, halfway decent. They're allowing the number 1 highest success rate in the NFL per gridiron IQ against the run. If you look at GIQ, it's a lot of green. And what I like to see is when I look at gridiron IQ, and then I go to PFF, right? As like my backup. 30th in team rush D grade are the Rams. So they can be had against the run. Antonio Gibson's pretty good. You give him 14 rushes, you give him 6 targets. If he finds the end zone, I think there's a good chance he ends up on he can be a GPP winning play. Sorry to steal one of your plays from a later segment.
You're good. No, I back up everything with that. And the fact that, David Johnson's sitting there at 5,200 and seemingly taking most of the ownership, even helping matters even more for Antonio Gibson.
All right, let's go to wide receiver. I'll start real quick for what I think is going to be the pretty chalky cash game play of the week, right? So if you're not a RotoGrinders premium member and you don't have access to the projected ownership and you don't subscribe to the Blitz, is not telling you he's the best play, I can just tell you here, it's a little interesting because I don't like these boom bust receivers too much in my cash games, but price matters, right? If I'm playing Lamar and I'm playing Zeke and I'm playing Mike Davis, right? And I'm playing all these guys, I'm probably going to have to save some money at wide receiver. I'm looking at Darius Slayton because, well, I don't think Dak is going to have to score a ton like he has the past couple of weeks. I do think the Giants are just going to fall behind in this game pretty quickly. So Slayton, if you look at Gridiron IQ, it's all green for the Dallas pass defense. And the thing about Slayton, he's got at least 29% of the air yards, right? We love air yards in every week, and he's gotten 2 weeks of 44+% of the air yards. And we saw this right last year. Whenever one of Tate, Shepard, or Ingram was out, Slayton was the dude. He's basically turning into the alpha in this offense. I like him quite a bit. And the what do we got here? Dallas 30th in pass coverage at PFF as a team grade. I think that's looking pretty good for Mr. Darius Slayton. They've allowed the second highest success rate to wide receiver pass attempts. So when teams throw to the wide receiver, Dallas is allowing those to be successful plays, based on down and distance and things like that. The one problem, Ian, the Giants just suck. So we've got a bad offensive coordinator. We got a bad coach. I'm not sure Danny Dimes is really good, right? He had a couple of spike weeks last year. That's been missing. But, right, you lose Saquon, you play the Steelers, you play the Bears, you play the Niners, you play the Rams. Maybe this is the bounce back week for the Giants. I think people will be on this game. I think Slayton might be the highest owned wide receiver when it's all said and done.
Yeah, and I would say with that, don't be afraid to go a little bit lower to Golden Tate in some GPP. I don't know if I can get behind trust him in cash, but under 5K, man, you got to save some salary somewhere. That's certainly a good spot.
I was looking at the Blitz. It likes Tate and Slayton, right? Those mid-tier, cheap sub 5K receivers. Yeah. If you want to jam in the other good plays, right? That's what it takes this week. So I can get behind Tate as well.
Yeah, for my cash guys, if you have the salary and want to pay up for Amari Cooper, I think it's fine. I know he's been this boomer bust guy in the past, but on pace for 204 targets. I mean, absolutely ridiculous. Last year he was at 119 and Gallup was at 113. That's why we're looking at Gallup and CeeDee Lamb so much going this year. It was okay, it could be, a number one receiver by the week type situation. No, with McCarthy there, he has really focused in on Cooper as, his Jordy Nelson, Devontae Adams as that, just focal point, undisputed number one target hog. And I think as good as James Bradbury has been playing this year, he's not someone that consistently moves into his slot. And I think he's a little bit better against more physically minded receivers, not, pristine route runners like Cooper. And then, I've been talking about the Panthers throughout this. There's going to be a lot of points in this game, and going after DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson makes a lot of sense. You're not having to spend more than 6K on either guy. People were kind of burned out about expecting that big game from DJ Moore last week. Didn't come through, but you're talking air yards. DJ Moore right now is one of just 11 receivers with at least 400 air yards through 4 weeks. We all kind of assumed Robbie would be the one coming into Carolina and getting the downfield opportunities. That's actually been DJ Moore this year. We see Robbie with a career low average target depth through 4 weeks, and he's making plays with it. Like, just because Robbie is playing well this year doesn't mean DJ isn't going to pick up steam as well. Again, this is a ascending Panthers passing game. I think we're going to see more than one guy emerge at some point, and that other guy will be DJ. And GPPs, Marquise Brown, man. I mean, I put together a Twitter clip like yesterday of just literally 5 different occasions this year where if Lamar just put that ball in a little bit better spot, we'd be having a lot different conversation about Hollywood Brown and what he's been able to bring to the table, consistently getting behind the defense. And as you said earlier, I mean, the Bengals secondary isn't awful necessarily, but I do think Hollywood, when him and Lamar are on, he can fly past any secondary. It's a matter of, when, not if, this breakout game is coming. And I definitely want to be ahead of the curve when it does finally hit.
Yeah, those Lamar to Marquise Brown, those weren't as bad as Foles to Mooney last night.
Not
But,
quite, yeah.
they're a little bit closer. It's right there, so I can get behind Marquise Brown. I want to go circle back to Carolina for you. I'm gonna ask you point blank. You got to take Robbie Anderson or DJ Moore. Moore is $100 more on DraftKings this week. Which one are you more likely to use?
Which one? Just, oh man, I want both. I would probably have to say Robbie deserves the higher projection at this point. It's safer. Again, he is not getting these same sort of, it's the same thing that's happened to Michael Gallup and why his production is inconsistent. DJ Moore, it's more of a boomer bust guy this year, unfortunately, but the booms are going to come at some point. But yeah, if it's either or, it's Robbie. Crazy, man. 2020.
I think I'd take Robbie too. We're at the point, right? We're 4 weeks into the season. You have to factor in what's happening, target share, and stuff like that. And it looks like Robbie Anderson is last year's DJ Moore, and DJ Moore is DJ Moore, and Curtis Samuel's nothing. And they started playing a lot of 12, two tight ends last week too, which is just, Curtis Samuel's sort of phasing out, and it's becoming Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore. I think I'd take Robbie too, but it's very close in my opinion. All right, let's move to tight end. And I guess I just want to talk a little bit about how many Giants, right? We know they're going up against the Cowboys, and the Cowboys play fast and the defense is bad, but how many Giants players can you put into one lineup? Because Ingram, that we like cheap tight ends for cash games. And after you get past Ingram on DraftKings, I think he's like 42 or 4,400, something like that. It looks pretty bleak out there. Maybe you can play like a Drew Sample, a Jordan Akins, a Logan Thomas revival, and maybe a couple of those targets find his way. But Ingram looks to be where the projections are telling people to play. And that does, push a lot of ownership and things like that. But I mean, he's been objectively pretty bad. There's 64 graded tight ends. He's 59th at PFF this year. ADOT, right? Last year, I think it was over 6, approaching 7. It's 4.6. It's all this little dink and dunk garbage crap that he's getting. He's getting targets, but they're bad quality targets, from, Daniel Jones, who I don't know if he's great. The offensive line's horrible. So some of these targets they're not even on target for being short. He's just cheap, and he's going up against the Cowboys. I'm debating it right now because this week we haven't had George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Darren Waller. They're all on the slate. They're all a little expensive, right? But these are legitimate, really good players that I don't see them really failing all too often this week. So I know you like Kittle. Ingram's the cheap play. What are we really doing here at tight end? This is the one spot I'm just a little befuddled on Friday afternoon.
Yeah, if you can get up to Kittle, I mean, the way they were using him last week, it's sometimes we see them actually use Kittle more as a pass blocker. He's such a great all-around player, but no, they know right now that they need, someone to juice up that passing game. And oh my goodness, like I was just happy to see Kittle back out there. I wasn't really even expecting them to see him look, 110% and just making the most out of every single target like he did. This dude is truly one of the best football players in the game. And I'm with you. If you can spend up and get him this week, go ahead and do it. With that said, I mean, again, these top 4 tight ends are all in a position to smash. For some reason, it looks like Mark Andrews is kind of the odd man out of the group on protecting ownership. So I know he popped up on the injury report yesterday. Let's make sure he doesn't have a designation going to the game, but I don't hate Andrews in GPPs at all. I would say the only cheap option potentially in cash is Ian Thomas if Chris Manhertz gets ruled out, because Thomas came in this year a little bit banged up. He was in the past when Greg Olsen has missed time. Thomas has almost provided, consistent tight end 1 production with a full-time role, but he's actually been working behind Chris Manhertz. So if the ankle injury keeps Manhertz out, I'm fine firing up Ian Thomas at just 3,400. Otherwise, yeah, I think I'm going to be trying to pay up. For GPPs, man, at the beginning of this week, I thought Eric Ebron would be getting more chalky, but he's actually still kind of staying under the radar a little bit. The week 1 game did not go well. He was splitting snaps with Vance McDonald, and, we didn't see anything out of him. But since then, he's been over 70% snaps, and they're kind of featuring him in the red zone. Nice touchdown 2 weeks ago where they had this lined up out wide, and Rossberger was able to put it on him, made a nice play in contested coverage. So facing an Eagles defense that Logan Thomas, George Kittle, Tyler Higbee, everyone is just balling out against this Eagles defense ever since they lost Malcolm Jenkins to the Saints. So going back to the well with someone like Eric Ebron, that I know, everyone just wants to use that GIF of the little girl letting the ball, hitter and then ball to the ground. Like, I get it. We've seen some bad years in the past from Ebron, but let's not forget the last time you played with a legit quarterback was 2018 with Andrew Luck, and the guy scored 15 touchdowns that year. So not saying he's going to get there this year at Rossberger, but in a good matchup in a week where, again, we don't have many low price tight ends, like, I'll gladly pay up an extra $300 or $500 off of Thomas or Sample to get the Ebron.
I'm looking maybe in a tournament. I did mention Jordan Akins. He's 3,300 if he gets cleared from the concussion protocol. He's basically emerging as the tight end one in Houston. I mean, Brandon Cooks isn't really doing anything. Kenny Stills isn't doing anything. Randall Cobb isn't doing anything. It's Will Fuller. Maybe Akins can get his way there at 3,200. He's sort of my if he suits up, I think he's probably going to with the concussion issues. He's about it. But I mean, tight end's pretty ugly, especially when you consider it's hard for me to see with Kelsey, Andrews, Waller, Ertz is going to get a bajillion targets. And you've got, Dalton Schultz, and we've got Evan Ingram. One of those guys is just going to have like a monster game. And you can win with a 0 at tight end because a lot of times these star players aren't on the slate. But when they're all on the slate, you probably need to have one of them. So it's just a little bit of a construction theory for tournaments. I don't know. I might go pretty overweight on the stud tight ends and make a couple sacrifices. Maybe I don't play Zeke in a couple lineups and play a little cheaper running back or something like that. But just something to think about from the couple 2-3 years I've looked at in the Millionaire Maker. When all the studs are in the play, you generally want to sort of tend your lineups towards them because the likelihood of one of them posting the big score is generally very high. All right, let's see here. What do we got? A couple defenses. I did the Thursday night stuff. I played the Bucks last night. It was sort of working out, but I mean, they got a couple of points, whatever. Defense doesn't really matter. There's not a must-have defense of the week. I think they're all expensive and salary is, right? Like if you're paying up, salary you can't just jam in the Rams and the Patriots aren't going to be on the slate, right? And things like that. You can't jam in these defenses because they're just so expensive and really prohibitive to getting the star players, to getting Lamar Jackson and to getting Zeke and to getting Mike Davis and Amari Cooper. You just can't have all those good things with a good defense. So where are we really looking at there this week?
If you really want to spend down, which as you're saying, I think you might have to, I think the Carolina Panthers are 2,400. I'm not trying to bring them up in every single segment of the show, but with this Falcons offense, Julio is probably not going to be out there. Ridley's banged up, and just that performance they put on against the Packers truly was atrocious. I'm sure going back home against a lesser defense that they'll put on slightly better, but at just 2,400, it's one of these situations where you look at the rest of the, defenses we're talking about in this under 3K range, and I think you can feel somewhat okay about the Panthers' chances at making some plays. But if you want to pay up for the Steelers and can somehow get there, man, because not only is Carson Wentz being pressured at such a high rate and the Steelers doing that, but Wentz has a league high 14 turnover-worthy plays this season. Nobody else is even over 8. So, I mean, again, this guy is playing reckless as all hell, and the Steelers are the type of defense that can make him pay in a major way.
Yeah, I like Steelers, Ravens, Rams if you can pay up. I do think the Chiefs will be reasonably popular. I think it's a little trappy. Derek Carr, he doesn't throw interceptions because he's just getting the ball out of his hands. So maybe that's a little trappy. If they have to force him to throw downfield, maybe it can get there. But the Chiefs would be the one. If they do end up being one of the more popular ones, I would sort of maybe try to spend up to the Ravens, Steelers, or 49ers. The teams they're going up against will pass and will turn over the ball pretty easily, in my opinion. If you're trying to save a couple of bucks, it's ugly. I don't know. I guess the Panthers. There's just not really any. Maybe Houston is probably going to be the popular one against Jacksonville.
I was looking at that one too. I think Houston could.
Yeah, 2,600. They're going to be popular. Maybe they can turn it around. But if you can spend up, I think that does make a lot of sense. It's just very tough, and I think the Texans will probably be the one everybody goes to. All right, guys. Don't forget if you want to get $5 off your RotoGrinders Premium, and you've never subscribed before. You've heard me reference Gridiron IQ and projected ownership. You can get $5 off rotogrinders.com/media/PFF. That's PFF for Pro Football Focus. We'll get you $5 off your first month here at RotoGrinders. All right, this is the time of the show. The people, Ian, they want to know. You've got your helicopter plays. It is free on PFF. You can go read this every week. If for some reason you missed the show, you missed the podcast, You want to know who Ian's talking about? Twitter, it's deleted from your phone, right? The wife is like, no more Twitter, get off of it. You can go to PFF and you can read his article. Who are we looking at this week, Ian?
Yeah, just so everyone knows, we need sub 5% ownership. Can't have a top 5 price tag. We're looking for 100 yards and 2 total touchdowns. So there have been 25 helicopters this season from running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. And again, when you factor in the price tags and ownership, we are truly trying to, pick the 1 or 2 occurrences of the week here that could happen. But that's what's fun. That's how you got to take down these GPPs. So I like going back to the well with Odell Beckham. Last week he was, chalky and he came in on it. But this week we're seeing him fly on the radar a little bit, sitting there 6,400. And yeah, I said on the PFF Fantasy Football podcast this week, I think selling high on him is appropriate because he's going to be more of a boomer bust wide receiver this year. They're using him in kind of the same way Stephon Diggs was last year, as more of a field stretcher. Only Adam Thielen has a higher percentage of their team's air yards through 4 weeks. So it's fantasy friendly opportunities, even if they're not all that many opportunities. And we're seeing a career high 16-yard average target depth through these 4 weeks. But I just think, and I think you might have called the Colts fraudulent before, and I agree with you, particularly on defense. Like, okay, they're good, but they are not the single best pass defense in the league right now. Xavier Rhodes is PFF's number 3 cornerback through 4 weeks. That is not going to hold. This dude was Rhodes wide open for the entire season last year. Credit to them for getting some, fairly easy matchups along the way. But we've only seen Allen Robinson, who had over 100 yards in the score, Darnell Mooney, and Adam Thielen. Those are the only guys that have even had more than 5 targets against this defense this season at the wide receiver position. So while they played well so far, I don't think they've been tested by a true talent like OBJ. And I think he can again make the most out of potentially limited targets. I also like Mark Andrews, again, pending on this kind of injury that popped up out of nowhere. But you look at those big 4 tight ends, and I agree with you. You need one of them, and Andrews is kind of coming in under the radar, probably because he doesn't have quite the same target ceiling as the other guys. But maybe Lamar, with this knee that I don't think is much, but maybe they do decide to pass the ball a little bit more. It's a matchup he smashed in last year. And again, while the Bengals secondary doesn't suck, we know Lamar is throwing to Andrews and Hollywood, and they can both make the most out of that production. So in a situation where Andrews is a little bit more underowned than I think we would usually expect, I don't even hate putting him in the flex spot. I mean, he plays receiver more or less for them, 60% snaps in the slot or out wide. Don't be afraid to treat him as such. Antonio Gibson, man, I'm right there with you. He is $5,000 right now. Like the second he gets this role that we know is on the table for him, he's going to be, at least $1,000, if not $2,000 more expensive. Going in this year, my opinion on Gibson was, okay, hopefully he carves out this, scat back role, gets 5 to 10 carries per game, and hopefully another 5 targets. He has already overtaken the early down role from Peyton Barber, and Bryce Love's on IR right now. So it's just a matter of when, not if, JD McKissick's, stranglehold on this starting job and targets evaporates. So Gibson looked great last week. And we get to a situation where the, Rams, they're not a pushover, but Miles Sanders had 131 total yards. Zeke had 127. Singletary had 121. When you get these running backs with 20 plus touches per game, you got to just fire them up pretty much regardless of the defense. And that is what Gibson is looking like. And then finally, I like Devontae Parker at 6,400, kind of same range as OBJ. And they're just going a little bit on the radar. Fitzpatrick, man, like it's the cries for Tua seem like they're louder than ever right now. I think we're going to see him get back to being the kind of DJF gunslinger we know and love. Right now, only Drew Brees and Daniel Jones have a lower deep ball rate than Fitz. It's been very weird. I don't think that's going to stick here moving forward. And Devontae Parker, despite all this, easily the number 1 wide receiver. I mean, this was the concern going this year, wondering about Preston Williams or Gesicki even overtaking him. Hasn't been done at all. Continues to play almost every single snap, run almost every single route. And, facing the 49ers, and to their credit, they continue to play well despite all these injuries across the line and in the secondary. But, you look at the teams they've been playing, Kyler Murray, Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones, Carson Wentz, the only quarterbacks they've had to face this season. I'm not saying Fitzpatrick is necessarily going to put up better numbers than those guys, but I still think this is a secondary that can be exploited. We just haven't seen it happen quite yet. Seeing CeeDee Lamb, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson getting more of the ownership in that range. I like taking a shot on Parker and OBJ.
I'll say if Fitz falls flat, I think you're going to see Tua probably next week. So, or Fitz is going to run for this week and then maybe 3 more. So they play the Broncos, the Chargers, and then the Rams after this game. After that Rams game, it's the Cardinals, Jets, Bengals, right? So that's like a perfect time to get Tua in some confidence. This could be Fitzpatrick's last chance to put tape for this year to be a backup somewhere next year. So I like him to basically come out slanging the football in my opinion, because this could be his last game. So I like that call quite a bit. All right, we're going to get out of here. As always, guys, if you want to read Ian's stuff, get over to PFF. And a hat tip to Ian. His podcast on PFF is quickly becoming one of my must-to listens on the week. You can find that. PFF, search it in the app, the podcast store. You'll find that. You can read his article, Mismatch Manifesto. You need the Edge subscription over there. And if you want to read his helicopter targets for free, that is still available on PFF, along with a bajillion other things that PFF has to offer over there. Ian, it's been fun. I'll see you next week, buddy. Thanks to everybody for watching, listening, downloading, streaming, whatever it is you're doing. We appreciate it here at RotoGrinders. I'm Britt, and we out, y'all.